Bring the useless Omega forward, and let the king's wolves decide if she is even worth the air she breathes." The words rolled through the royal council hall like winter thunder, cold enough to make every candle flame bend. Emily Harper did not lift her head at first. She could feel the eyes on her before she saw them. Hundreds of polished nobles wrapped in velvet and silver, all staring as if she were a stain dragged across their black marble floor. Her wrists were bound with thin silver cord, not tight enough to wound, but cold enough to sting with every heartbeat. The hem of her faded gray dress brushed the stone. One sleeve was torn. Mud marked her boots. Dried rain clung to her pale hair in soft, tangled strands. She looked nothing like the women who stood near the throne in pearl gowns and moon-white silk, women bred to smile without trembling, to bow without lowering themselves, to be chosen without ever needing to be kind. Emily had been brought here from the royal kennels, where she had spent the night sitting beside the crown wolves after their return from the northern border. No one else would go near them when they paced, restless and hurting, their golden eyes burning in the dark like lanterns in a graveyard. Emily had gone because one of them had stopped eating. Another had whined softly whenever the wind struck the gate. A third had pressed its injured paw beneath the bars as if asking for something no healer had thought to give. So she had washed the dirt from their fur. She had warmed broth over a small stove. She had sung under her breath until the largest wolf, Ash, finally lowered his head and slept. For that, the council had called her dangerous. For that, they had called her delusional. For that, Counselor Malcolm Graves had smiled before the entire court and named her useless. On the obsidian throne above them, King Adrian Blackthorn watched in silence. He did not lean forward. He did not defend her. He sat carved in shadow and royal discipline, one hand resting on the arm of the throne, his black hair neat, his face unreadable, his amber eyes fixed on Emily with the stillness of a predator deciding whether the small thing before him was prey or a problem. Vanessa Crowe, the council's favored Luna candidate, stepped delicately away from Emily as if poverty might stain her slippers. "Your Majesty," Vanessa said, her voice sweet enough to hide the blade beneath it. "An Omega who cannot command her own wolf has no place touching yours." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the hall. Emily swallowed. Her fear beat behind her ribs like a trapped bird, but she did not cry. Crying had never opened locked doors. Crying had never softened a councilman's mouth. She only looked at the floor and thought of Ash pressing his great head against her knee in the dark, breathing easier because someone had stayed. Malcolm lifted his silver-topped cane and pointed toward the sealed doors at the far end of the hall. "Open the wolf gate," he ordered. "Let the crown wolves come to the throne, as they have for every true alpha king before this one. Let this girl see what royal beasts do when faced with a servant who forgot her place." A deep metallic groan shuddered through the chamber as the massive doors began to open. Cold air swept in first, carrying the scent of pine, snow, and something ancient enough to make even the boldest nobles fall quiet. Then the crown wolves entered. 12 of them. Huge, silent, black and silver shapes moving over the marble with terrible grace, their eyes bright gold, their shoulders nearly level with a grown man's chest. The court bowed its head. The council straightened proudly. Vanessa smiled. This was the sacred ritual. The wolves would cross the hall, gather beneath the throne, and confirm the power of King Adrian before every noble bloodline in the north. Emily stood alone in the center of their path, small and bound and unwanted. She tried to step back, but the silver cord tugged at her wrists. Ash, the largest of the 12, reached the middle of the hall and stopped. He did not look at the throne. He looked at Emily. The silence changed. It grew heavy, watchful, sharp around the edges. Emily's breath caught as Ash came toward her, each step slow, deliberate, impossible. "No," she whispered so softly only the wolf could have heard. "Don't do this. They'll blame you too." Ash lowered his massive head. His warm breath brushed her bound hands. Then, before the throne, before the council, before the Alpha King himself, the crown wolf sat at Emily Harper's feet. For one stunned heartbeat, no one moved. The royal council hall, which had moments ago been full of whispers and polished cruelty, became so quiet Emily could hear the faint scrape of her own breath. Ash sat before her, as if the black marble beneath her worn boots had become more sacred than the steps of the throne. His broad silver-black shoulders rose and fell with calm, steady power. His golden eyes did not flick toward King Adrian. They stayed on Emily, soft in a way no one in that room believed a crown wolf could be. Then the second wolf left the royal path. It was a lean white she-wolf with frost-colored fur and a narrow scar through one ear. She moved past the council dais without bowing her head, crossed the stretch of marble that separated power from shame, and sat beside Ash, her flank pressed protectively against Emily's left side. A gasp broke from somewhere among the nobles. Malcolm Graves lowered his cane an inch. Vanessa's smile thinned. Emily could feel heat rushing into her face, not from pride, but from terror. This was not supposed to happen. The crown wolves had followed the throne for 2 centuries. They had guarded kings, judged traitors, and ended wars simply by entering a room. They did not choose servants. They did not comfort omegas. They did not abandon ritual. A third wolf came forward, then a fourth, then the rest. One by one, all 12 turned away from the obsidian throne and settled around Emily in a living circle of fur, breath, and ancient authority. Their bodies formed a barrier without a single growl. Their silence was worse than a threat. It was a verdict. Emily looked down at the silver cord around her wrists. Ash's nose brushed it again, careful, almost apologetic. The touch made her swallow hard. "Please," she whispered, barely daring to move her lips. "You have to go back. They will not forgive this." Ash only lowered his head until his chin rested across the toes of her muddy boots. The gesture was gentle, but the meaning struck the hall. Like a bell. The wolves had not merely approached her. They had placed themselves at her feet. Malcolm found his voice first. "This is a trick." The words came out too sharp, too quick. Some hedge-born charm. Some kennel witchcraft. Emily flinched at the accusation, but the wolves did not. They remained still, each massive body turned outward, each golden gaze watching the room instead of the throne. King Adrian rose. The entire court bowed as if pulled down by an invisible hand. Even Malcolm bent his head. Even Vanessa lowered her eyes. Emily, surrounded by the crown wolves, could not move at all. Adrian stepped down from the throne, and with every measured step, the air seemed to tighten. He was not loud. He did not need to be. Power gathered around him like a storm held inside human skin. His gaze moved from Ash to the circle, then finally to Emily. For the first time, she saw something break through his perfect royal stillness. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition's shadow. "Ash," Adrian commanded, his voice low and absolute. "Return to the throne." The great wolf did not move. A murmur rippled through the court and died just as quickly. Adrian's eyes shifted, amber brightening toward gold. "All of you," he said, colder now. "Move away from her." The wolves stayed seated. Emily's heart climbed into her throat. She knew enough about royal law to understand the danger unfolding around her. A crown wolf refusing a direct command from the Alpha King was not disobedience. It was an omen. It was the kind of thing old women whispered about during eclipses and soldiers carved into memorial stones after kingdoms fell. She tried to step out of the circle before this became worse, but Ash rose smoothly and blocked her path with his body. Not roughly, not threateningly. He simply refused to let her stand alone. Adrian stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Emily caught the scent of winter pine and rain on dark stone. Close enough that she saw the faint tension in his jaw. "What did you do to my wolves?" he asked. Emily lifted her eyes, and every cruel laugh in the room seemed to press against her spine. "Nothing, Your Majesty," she said, her voice thin but steady. "I only listened when they hurt." Emily did not know why the truth sounded so small in that enormous hall. She had expected her voice to disappear beneath the weight of the throne, but the words stayed there between them, fragile and bare. King Adrian studied her, as if she were a locked door in a burning house. "You listened," he repeated, and the quiet disbelief in his voice was sharper than anger. Emily nodded once. Ash would not eat after the Northern Patrol returned. The white one kept chewing at her bandage because it was tied too tightly. The brown wolf near the back hates the sound of iron hinges. He shakes when the kennel gate closes. A few nobles shifted uneasily. They had watched the crown wolves for years as symbols, weapons, omens, living proof that the throne still commanded something older than law. Emily spoke of them as if they were tired soldiers with sore paws and bad dreams. Vanessa gave a soft, cold laugh. How touching. The kennel girl remembers animal habits and now expects us to call it magic. Emily lowered her gaze, but before shame could fold her inward, the white she-wolf turned her head and stared at Vanessa with such stillness that the Luna candidate went silent. Adrian noticed. Emily saw him notice. His eyes moved over the circle again, counting every wolf, every body angled outward, every tail lying still against the marble. If you did not command them, he said, then why are they protecting you from me? The question pulled all breath from Emily's chest. She looked at Ash, at his great head still resting near her boots, at the silver cord cutting a cold line around her wrists. Maybe they are not protecting me from you, she said carefully. Maybe they are protecting something they think you are about to lose. The hall reacted like a pond struck by stone. Whispers spread and vanished. Malcolm's cane snapped against the floor. Enough. Your Majesty, this Omega is twisting sacred protocol into theater. The wolves must be forced back to the throne before the court mistakes disorder for prophecy. Adrian did not look at him. That was the first thing that frightened Malcolm. The king's attention remained on Emily, and in that attention there was no softness, but there was focus, deep and unsettling. He took one more step forward. Ash rose, slow as moonrise. The other wolves rose with him. No snarling, no snapping jaws. Just 12 ancient bodies lifting in one smooth motion between the Alpha King and the girl everyone had named worthless. Emily panicked. Not for herself. For them. Stop, she whispered, stepping forward before fear could catch her. The silver cord pulled at her wrists, but she ignored the sting. Please. He is your king. Ash did not move aside. Emily looked past the wolf to Adrian. They are not trying to shame you, Your Majesty. They are scared. Adrian's face changed by less than an inch, but she saw it. A flicker, like a candle trapped behind glass. Of what? He asked. Emily swallowed. Of the same thing they were scared of last night. Being used until they break, then punished for showing pain. The words landed too softly for how deeply they cut. Even the council seemed to feel them. Adrian's jaw tightened. For a moment, Emily thought she had gone too far. Then his gaze dropped to her bound hands. The silver cord gleamed against her pale skin, delicate and cruel as frost. He extended his hand. The entire room stiffened. Emily did too, but she did not pull away. Adrian's fingers closed around the cord without touching her skin. With a controlled motion, he broke the fastening and let the silver fall to the marble in a bright, whispering coil. Sensation rushed back into Emily's hands, hot and tingling. Ash exhaled, a deep sound that trembled through the floor. Malcolm's face drained of color. Vanessa's lips parted in disbelief. Adrian looked at the fallen cord, then at the 12 wolves who still refused the throne, then at Emily Harper as though the answer to an old wound had just stepped into his hall wearing muddy boots and a torn gray dress. No one touches her, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, until I know why my wolves chose her. The order should have ended the matter, but the court did not know what to do with silence after a king had broken protocol for an Omega. Emily was escorted from the royal council hall beneath the watch of 12 crown wolves, though escorted was the wrong word. The guards walked behind her. The wolves walked around her. Ash kept close enough that his shoulder brushed her hip with every other step, steadying her when the polished corridors seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Servants stopped carrying trays. Nobles paused beneath archways. Every face carried the same question, hidden behind careful eyes. What was she? Emily wished she knew. The royal wing smelled of cedar smoke, cold stone, and money old enough to forget kindness. Tapestries hung from walls higher than the roof of the kennel house, where she had slept on burlap sacks during winter storms. Chandeliers glittered overhead like trapped stars. Her muddy boots left faint marks on the pale runner carpet, and each mark made her feel smaller, as if the palace itself was recording proof that she did not belong. They placed her in a guest chamber near the eastern kennels, a room larger than the entire laundry house, where she had lived since she was 16. There was a bed with silver posts, a fireplace burning blue-white flame, and a basin of warm water waiting on a carved oak stand. Emily stood in the center of it all, hands open at her sides, afraid to touch anything. Outside the door, Ash lay down. Then the white she-wolf, then the brown wolf who hated iron hinges. By sunset, all 12 crown wolves had arranged themselves along the hallway like a living wall. When a royal healer arrived with a small silver lancet to take Emily's blood for testing, Ash lifted his head. He did not growl. He only looked. The healer went pale and quietly put the lancet away. When Vanessa Crow appeared an hour later with 2 maids and a gown the color of winter roses, she smiled as if the hallway belonged to her. "The king is being generous," she said through the closed door, her voice honeyed and sharp. "Do not mistake a temporary mystery for worth." Emily said nothing. She sat beside the fireplace with her knees drawn close, drying her damp hair with an old towel she had asked a maid to bring instead of the silk one folded on the bed. Vanessa's patience cracked. The door opened without permission. She stepped inside and dropped the gown across the floor at Emily's feet. "You can put this on and pretend, Kennel Rat. It will not make you royal." Emily looked at the beautiful fabric lying in the ash-dusted shadow near the hearth. Before she could answer, 3 crown wolves rose in the hallway. The floor seemed to hum beneath their paws. Vanessa froze. Her perfume, all white lilies and expensive powder, turned sour with fear. Emily stood quickly. "Please do not scare her," she whispered to the wolves, then turned to Vanessa, not angry, only tired. "And please do not throw things at me. I will pick it up because someone had to sew it, but I will not wear it because you meant it as a leash." Vanessa stared at her as if a chair had spoken. Then she backed out of the room, pride held together by threads. Long after the door closed, Emily carried the gown to the bed and smoothed the wrinkles from its skirt. She could not bear ruined things. That night, King Adrian came without a herald. Emily did not see him at first. She was sitting on the floor in the corridor, surrounded by the crown wolves, singing so softly the melody barely rose above the crackle of the torches. Ash's head rested on her lap. The white she-wolf slept with her nose tucked under Emily's wrist. The brown wolf dozed beside the door, calm even though the hinges were iron. Adrian stood at the end of the hall, half hidden in shadow, and watched the impossible made quiet. Emily was not commanding them. She was not charming them. She was simply staying. His wolf stirred beneath his ribs, restless and certain in a way that unsettled him more than any rebellion. Then, from somewhere deep inside him, a word rose like breath against glass. Not spoken aloud. Not yet. Hours. Midnight settled over the royal wing like black velvet drawn across a cage. Emily had been given a bed softer than anything she had ever touched, but sleep would not come near her. The palace was too quiet, the fire too bright, the sheets too clean. She sat instead by the window with a wool blanket around her shoulders, watching snow drift over the eastern courtyard in pale, soundless sheets. Beyond the glass, the crown wolves slept in the corridor there, breathing deep and uneven, a strange lullaby made of fur, frost, and old loyalty. For the first time in years, Emily was not alone, and that frightened her more than loneliness ever had. Kindness could be taken away. Warmth could become evidence. A door could open, and the whole world could decide again that she had no right to exist inside it. She pressed her fingers to the faint red marks the silver cord had left on her wrists and tried not to think about the way King Adrian had looked at her, as if she were not beneath notice, but dangerous enough to change the shape of the room. Then Ash made a sound outside her door. It was not a growl. It was not a whine. It was a broken, breathless noise that made Emily stand before she understood why. The hallway was cold when she stepped out, the stone floor biting through her thin socks. Ash lay on his side beneath the torchlight, his massive body trembling, his golden eyes unfocused. Dark veins of silver light shimmered beneath his fur like cracks under ice. The other wolves circled him, restless and low, their paws scraping softly against the floor. Emily dropped to her knees beside him. Ash. His head lifted a fraction, then fell against the stone. Somewhere far down the corridor, a bell began to ring. 1 chime, then 3, then 7. Palace guards rushed from both ends of the hall, followed by royal healers in white coats and council aides carrying polished cases. No one looked at Emily except to move her aside. "Stand back," one healer ordered. "This is a royal matter." Emily backed away because she knew that tone. It was the sound of doors closing. The healer knelt beside Ash and pressed a crystal instrument over the wolf's chest. The crystal clouded instantly, turning a smoky gray. The healer's face changed. Silver curse recurrence, he said quietly. It has reached the heart bond. The words meant nothing to Emily, but they struck the guards like winter lightning. At the far end of the hallway, another door burst open. King Adrian staggered into view with one hand braced against the wall, his face pale beneath the torchlight, his eyes burning gold. He did not look wounded, yet every step seemed to cost him. Something hidden and terrible. His breathing was controlled, but too slow, as if he were holding a storm inside his ribs by force alone. Emily understood then. Whatever was hurting Ash was hurting him too. Malcolm Graves arrived wrapped in a dark robe, his expression grave in a way that looked rehearsed. The wolf is compromised, he said. If the curse spreads through the pact bond, it could destabilize the king. The old law is clear. The infected beast must be put down before dawn. Emily heard the words, and the hallway tilted. Ash, who had sat at her feet when the whole court laughed. Ash, who had guarded her door. Ash, who had trusted her hands before any person in that palace had trusted her voice. The healers began preparing a silver restraint. The crown wolves moved anxiously, but Adrian raised one trembling hand, forcing them still with what remained of his command. Emily stepped forward. No, Malcolm turned as if he had forgotten she could speak. This is not a kennel matter, girl. Emily's fear rose, sharp and cold, but something stronger rose beneath it. You do not kill someone because their pain is inconvenient. The hallway went silent. Adrian's golden gaze found hers through the haze of whatever agony he refused to show. Emily, he said, his voice rough, warning and plea tangled together. Do not come closer. But Ash made that broken sound again, softer this time, and stretched one great paw toward her across the stone. Emily crossed the last few feet and knelt in the space no one else dared enter. She gathered Ash's heavy head into her lap, ignoring the gasps around her, ignoring Malcolm's hissed command, ignoring even the king's dangerous stillness. Her hands shook as she smoothed the fur between Ash's ears. You sat with me when everyone wanted me gone, she whispered. I am not leaving you now. Then she began to sing. The melody came from a place Emily had never been brave enough to name. It was not a song she had learned from sheet music or church bells or drunken kitchen maids humming through winter chores. It was older than memory, tucked somewhere beneath her heartbeat, waiting for the moment pain became too large for silence. At first, her voice was barely more than breath. Thin, shaking, almost swallowed by the hiss of torches and the low panic of the wolves. Then Ash's trembling slowed beneath her hands. The dark shimmer under his fur pulled inward, gathering like storm clouds trapped beneath ice. Emily kept singing. She did not understand the words slipping from her mouth. They were not English, not any court language she had heard, not the rough northern dialect the guards used when they thought servants were not listening. The sounds were soft, round, silver-edged, and every note seemed to make the hallway colder and brighter at the same time. The healer nearest to her stumbled backward. His crystal instrument slipped from his fingers and rolled across the stone, glowing white instead of gray. Malcolm Graves went completely still. For the first time since Emily had seen him, the counselor looked afraid without trying to hide it. Stop her, he whispered. No one moved. Not the guards. Not the healers. Not even Vanessa, who had appeared at the far end of the hall with a robe clutched around her shoulders and disbelief draining the color from her face. Emily's hands warmed against Ash's fur. Beneath her palms, the strange silver-dark veins began to loosen. They lifted from him as faint smoke, curling upward in thin ribbons that smelled like cold metal after rain. Ash released a long, shuddering breath. At the same instant, King Adrian dropped one hand against the wall, his jaw clenched, his golden eyes locked on Emily, as if she had reached through the wolf and touched the hidden wound inside him. The front of his dark shirt glowed, not with blood, not with fire, but with the same silver pattern that had marked Ash. A curse shared through the crown bond. A wound no court healer had ever admitted was still alive. Emily saw it and understood nothing except that both of them were hurting. Her song faltered. Adrian's voice came low and strained. Do not stop. The words were not a command this time. They were trust, raw and unwilling, dragged out of a king who had built his life around never needing anyone. Emily swallowed the fear rising in her throat and began again. The mark appeared. When she placed one hand on Ash's chest and reached the other toward Adrian, not touching him, only bridging the space between them with the song. A pale crescent of light bloomed around her wrist, delicate as moonlight on water. Then another line curved beneath it. Then a ring of ancient symbols formed on her skin, bright enough to cast shadows across the hallway walls. The crown wolves lowered their heads. Every one of them. Not in fear. In recognition. The white she-wolf pressed her nose to the floor. The brown wolf who feared iron hinges exhaled and closed his eyes. Ash's body settled in Emily's lap, no longer trembling, no longer fighting for each breath. The silver smoke thinned, faded, and vanished into the torchlight. Adrian straightened slowly. Color returned to his face, but his expression had changed into something far more dangerous than pain. Wonder, restrained by suspicion. Hope, held behind a locked door. He stared at the glowing mark on Emily's wrist as though it had stepped out of a legend he had been taught to mourn. The oldest healer sank to one knee, his voice shaking. That is the crown wolf mark. Malcolm snapped toward him. Silence. But the word cracked when it left his mouth. Emily looked down at her wrist, terrified by the light pulsing beneath her own skin. What does that mean? She asked. No one answered at first. The hallway seemed to hold its breath around her. Then Adrian took one careful step closer, his gaze no longer on Ash, no longer on the council, but on Emily Harper, as if every lie in his kingdom had just begun to unravel around her. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke, but it carried farther than any shout. Emily, he said, who was your mother? Emily had never heard her mother's name spoken like a threat before. The question stayed in the hallway long after King Adrian asked it, turning every face toward her with a hunger that made her skin prickle. Ash rested quietly at her side now, healed but watchful, his great head lifted toward Malcolm Graves as if the wolf had finally recognized the shape of an old enemy. Emily curled her glowing wrist against her chest. Clara Harper, she said. Her voice came out small, but the name did not. It moved through the royal wing like a key turning inside a lock. The oldest healer inhaled sharply. A guard crossed himself in the old northern way. Vanessa stared as if Emily had suddenly become something she could not insult without permission. Malcolm recovered first. A laundress, he said too quickly. A common woman who died of fever. There is no mystery here. Adrian's gaze did not leave Emily. My archives will decide that. By dawn, the palace had changed its breathing. Doors that had always opened for counselors remained watched. Servants whispered behind trays. The crown wolves followed Emily wherever she went, not crowding, not threatening, simply present, a silent court of fur and gold eyes. Adrian ordered the sealed records brought from the lower vault, a chamber beneath the palace where old truths were kept cold enough to survive kings. Emily stood beside him while 3 iron boxes were opened on a stone table. Inside were birth ledgers, healer registries, trial transcripts, and one small ribbon the color of faded lavender, pressed between pages as carefully as a prayer. Emily knew that ribbon. Her mother had tied one like it around her wrist when she was little and told her that lost things sometimes remembered the way home. Adrian read in silence, but the harder his face became, the more Emily understood that the past was not dead. It had been hidden. Clara Harper had not been a laundress. She had been the last royal healer of the moon-blessed line, sworn not to the council, but to the crown wolves themselves. Her gift had not been dominance. It had been recognition. She could hear pain inside the pack bond. She could call wounded wolves back from the edge of madness. She could reveal a false Luna by placing her hand upon the throne. The final page bore Malcolm's signature beneath a sealed accusation of treason. No witness names. No evidence. Only a sentence carried out before sunrise 18 years ago. Emily touched the page with trembling fingers. The letters blurred. He told me she got sick, she whispered. Everyone told me she got sick. Adrian closed the ledger with a sound like stone striking stone. They lied. Across the chamber, Malcolm's voice drifted from the stairwell, smooth and poisonous. Careful, Your Majesty. Old records can be misunderstood by desperate girls. He had not come alone. 2 council guards stood behind him, their silver badges catching the blue vault light. Vanessa lingered near the steps, pale but determined, dressed in white as if fabric could make her chosen. Malcolm's eyes fixed on Emily's wrist, where the crown wolf mark had dimmed but not vanished. That mark is not a blessing, he said. It is instability. Her mother nearly fractured the throne with the same delusion. Adrian stepped in front of Emily, but Malcolm smiled. The council has already called an emergency hearing. At sunset, the court will decide whether the Omega is a royal asset or a royal threat. The words sounded legal, clean, civilized. That made them colder. By afternoon, Emily was taken from the guest chamber under the excuse of preparation. The crown wolves were lured to the eastern yard by a false alarm from the kennels. Adrian was delayed by council procedure, trapped in a room full of laws written by men who feared living power. Emily realized too late that quiet could be another kind of cage. Malcolm met her in a small antechamber behind the council hall. No crowd now. No laughter. Just him, Vanessa, and a crystal vial filled with clear liquid that shimmered like melted frost. "Drink," Malcolm said, placing it on the table. "It will calm the mark before you embarrass yourself further." Emily looked at the vial, then at his pleasant face. "You mean hide it?" His smile thinned. A useless Omega was easier to control than a real Luna. Vanessa's breath caught, but Malcolm did not look away from Emily. "Your mother forgot that. You would be wise not to repeat her mistake." Fear moved through Emily, cold and familiar, but it no longer found the same empty rooms inside her. Something had changed in the hallway when Ash breathed again. Something had changed when Adrian asked for the truth instead of accepting the lie. She stepped back from the table. "No," she said. One word. Small. Unpolished. Hers. Malcolm's expression hardened. "Then the court will watch you fall." The lamps flickered. From somewhere beyond the walls came a low, rising sound. Not a single howl. 12 of them. The room trembled around it. Emily lifted her head, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel abandoned by the silence that followed. The sunset hearing began beneath a ceiling of black glass, where the last light of day burned red across the royal council hall like a warning no one wanted to read. Emily was brought in through the side doors, not dragged, not carried, but surrounded by council guards who kept just enough distance to pretend she was not being treated as a threat. Her gray dress had been replaced with a plain white gown chosen by someone who wanted her to look guilty and fragile at the same time. The crown wolf mark on her wrist had been covered with a strip of silver cloth, cold against her skin, but even through the fabric, she could feel it pulsing like a hidden moon beneath clouds. The court was full. Every noble family in the Northern Territories had come to witness the decision. Some stared with open curiosity, some with fear, others with the eager brightness of people hoping to see a fall they could discuss over dinner. Vanessa stood beside the lower steps of the throne in a flawless white gown, pearls woven through her dark hair, her chin lifted as if the future had already been measured and fitted to her shoulders. Malcolm Graves stood before the council dais with both hands resting on his cane, calm as a man who had buried the truth so long ago he believed the ground itself belonged to him. King Adrian sat on the obsidian throne above them, his face unreadable, his hands still, his amber eyes fixed on Emily. The old law held him there. During a formal council judgment, the Alpha King could not speak until the accusation was complete, unless the throne itself was challenged. Malcolm knew that. Everyone knew that. Emily knew it too from the way Adrian's jaw tightened when she was placed in the center of the hall, exactly where she had stood that morning, exactly where shame had first been offered to her like a crown of ice. "Emily Harper," Malcolm announced, his voice smooth enough to pass for mercy. "You are accused of interfering with sacred royal bonds, endangering the crown wolves, deceiving the court with forbidden bloodline magic, and attempting to destabilize the Alpha King's rule." The words floated through the chamber, clean and polished, stripped of all the fear that had created them. Emily lifted her head. Her hands were not bound this time. Malcolm had wanted the court to see she did not need chains to look powerless. The council recommends immediate removal from royal grounds and permanent sealing of the mark before it can spread disorder through the pack. A murmur rose, then vanished when he raised his cane. Vanessa stepped forward, her voice soft with rehearsed sorrow. "No one wishes cruelty upon an Omega, but compassion must never be allowed to endanger a kingdom." Emily looked at her, and for one strange second, she felt almost sorry for the woman. Vanessa did not understand that being chosen by power was not the same as being loved by anything living. Malcolm turned toward the throne. By ancient law, unless the crown itself rejects this judgment, the council's decision stands. Adrian's hand tightened on the arm of the throne. The air grew dense. Emily could feel his wolf pressing against the room, furious and caged by law. Malcolm smiled. Let the record show the throne remained silent. The silver cloth around Emily's wrist burned cold. The mark beneath it pulsed once, then again. She heard something then, faint at first, beneath the whispers, beneath Malcolm's voice, beneath her own frightened breathing. A sound like paws moving over stone. The great doors at the end of the hall trembled. One guard turned. Then another. Malcolm's smile disappeared. The doors opened with a deep groan, and the crown wolves entered. 12 enormous shapes crossed the threshold, black and silver, silent as snowfall, their golden eyes reflecting every candle in the hall. No one had summoned them. No handler walked beside them. No command guided their path. Ash led them forward, his head high, the white she-wolf at his shoulder, the brown wolf calm beside her despite the iron hinges screaming behind them. The court parted without being told. The wolves passed the council dais. They passed Vanessa, who stepped back so quickly her pearls rattled softly against her throat. They passed the throne. Every breath in the hall stopped. Emily stood alone at the center of the marble, her wrist hidden, her heart shaking itself against her ribs. Ash came to her first. He lowered his head and caught the edge of the silver cloth gently between his teeth. With one careful pull, he drew it away. The crown wolf mark shone silver bright across her skin. A sound moved through the room, not a gasp, not a prayer, something between the two. Ash folded his front legs and bowed before her. One by one, the other wolves did the same. 12 crown wolves lowered themselves at Emily Harper's feet, while the obsidian throne stood empty of their loyalty. Behind the throne, the ancient statue of the moon goddess opened its stone eyes, and silver light spilled down the wall like dawn over snow. Malcolm stumbled back. The oldest healer dropped to both knees. Vanessa covered her mouth, her perfect composure breaking at last. Emily could not move. Tears blurred the wolves into shapes of light and shadow. Then Adrian rose. The old law shattered in the sound of his first step down from the throne. No one tried to stop him. He descended the black stairs, crossed the hall, and knelt on one knee before Emily, not as a conquered king, but as a man finally recognizing the truth his kingdom had tried to bury. His voice carried through the silence, low, certain, and impossible to twist. The council called her dangerous because they feared what my wolves already knew. Emily Harper is not a threat to the crown. She is the one the crown wolves chose. Malcolm opened his mouth, but Adrian looked at him, and the words died before they became sound. Then the king turned back to Emily, and something fierce and protective softened around the edges of his face. They called you useless, he said, each word striking the hall like a bell. My wolves called you Luna. The hall did not erupt. It surrendered. One by one, nobles who had spent years measuring worth by bloodline and title lowered their eyes before the girl they had laughed at that morning. The sound was soft at first, fabric, brushing marble, knees bending, pride folding under the weight of what every wolf in the room already knew. Emily stood at the center of it all with the silver mark glowing on her wrist, and Ash bowed at her feet. But victory did not feel the way stories said it should. It did not taste sweet. It tasted like tears she refused to shed, like old grief rising through a door that had finally opened, like the aching memory of a mother whose name had been stolen and returned in the same breath. Malcolm Graves was not dragged away in chaos. King Adrian simply turned his head, and the royal guard stepped forward with the quiet certainty of law finally waking from a long sleep. The sealed records were brought into the hall. The forged accusation against Clara Harper was read aloud. The order that erased her name was read aloud. The hidden reports of the crown wolves being weakened, tested, and controlled through council-approved rituals were read aloud. Each word stripped another layer from Malcolm's polished face until nothing remained but a frightened man in expensive robes. Vanessa Crowe stood near the throne, pale and silent, the pearls in her hair trembling each time she breathed. When Adrian announced that her candidacy was void, she did not argue. She only looked at Emily, and for the first time, there was no insult in her eyes. Only the shock of a woman realizing that power had stood beside her for years and still left her empty-handed. Emily should have felt taller. Instead, she looked down and saw a faint smear of dark residue still clinging to Ash's muzzle from the curse that had nearly taken him. The court waited for her to speak like a queen. She knelt instead. A ripple of confusion passed through the nobles as Emily tore a clean strip from the hem of the white gown she had never chosen and gently wiped Ash's fur. The great wolf leaned into her touch with a sigh so deep it seemed to loosen something in the walls. "You are still cold," she whispered to him, as if the entire kingdom were not watching. "I told you I would not leave." Adrian watched her from a few feet away, and in that moment he understood why the wolves had chosen her before he had. Not because she wanted the throne, not because she wanted revenge, because when given a room full of people waiting to worship her, Emily Harper still noticed the creature that hurt. The moon goddess statue behind the throne dimmed, but the mark on Emily's wrist remained, soft and steady, no longer a blaze of proof but a promise. Adrian approached slowly, stopping close enough that she could hear the controlled breath beneath his calm. He did not reach for her, as if she were a prize. He offered his hand, as if choice mattered more than ceremony. "Stand beside me, Emily Harper," he said, his voice low enough for her, but clear enough for the hall. "Not because the throne needs you, because I do." Emily looked at his hand, then at the wolves, then at the people who had once made a cage out of silence. She placed her fingers in his. Warmth moved through her palm, steady and real, not a command, not a claim, but an invitation. When she rose, the crown wolves rose with her. Ash stood at her right side. The white she-wolf took her left. The others formed a crescent behind them, not guarding the throne anymore, but guarding the girl who had taught them that loyalty could be gentle and still unbreakable. Adrian did not crown her that night. Emily asked him not to. There were records to correct, wounded wolves to heal, servants to protect, and a mother's grave to find beneath the snow. So the court watched its new Luna, a parent, walk down from the dais before she ever sat upon it, passing the nobles who bowed not out of fear, but because the old world had changed shape before their eyes. Outside, the storm that had covered the palace since dawn finally ended. Snow slipped from the window ledges in soft white sheets. Beyond the eastern towers, the first light of morning spread across the northern sky, silver and gold over miles of pine. Emily stood beside Adrian at the open doors of the hall. The crown wolves gathered behind them, and for the first time in her life, the silence around her did not feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. Far beneath the palace, where the oldest stones held secrets even the council had feared to name, a thin crack opened across the base of the moon goddess statue. No one